I'm Emma, 34 years old, and I just learned that being the good daughter means absolutely nothing when the will gets read. For 15 years, I'd been the one who stayed, the one who answered midnight phone calls about Dad's heart medication, the one who drove Mom to every doctor's appointment, every treatment, every scan. I'd put my teaching career on hold, turned down job offers in other states, and watched my college friends get married and buy houses while I lived in my childhood bedroom, making sure my parents weren't alone. And this was my reward. The lawyer's voice cut through the funeral home's stale air like a blade. And to my beloved daughter Sarah, I leave the family home at 1247 Maple Street, along with all its contents and memories. I felt my world tilt sideways as 200 pairs of eyes turned to watch my reaction. Sarah, who hadn't set foot in that house for 5 years. Sarah, who refused to visit when Dad was dying. Sarah, who was getting the home where I'd spent the last decade caring for our parents while she built her perfect life in California. The same house where I'd changed Dad's bandages, where I'd held Mom's hand through chemo, where I'd sacrificed my 20s and 30s to be the dutiful daughter. And now, it was hers. The reading continued, but the words became white noise. I stared at Sarah across the crowded room, watching her dab fake tears with a tissue while her husband whispered calculations in her ear. She caught my eye for just a moment and offered that practiced smile she'd perfected for her real estate career. No shame, no acknowledgement, just entitlement. The funeral director was asking people to move to the reception hall, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like concrete. This betrayal wasn't just about money or property. It was about recognition, about love, about being seen. It was about every birthday they forgot, every achievement they dismissed, every time they lit up when Sarah called but barely looked up when I walked in the room. But as I sat there, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, burning like acid in my chest. But underneath it, something harder was forming. Something that felt like steel. Because they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. They'd assumed I'd just take it, just disappear quietly like I always had. They'd forgotten that the daughter who handles everything knows everything. And I knew things they'd never imagined I'd discover. The thing about being invisible is that people forget you're listening. They forget you're watching. They forget you're learning. For 15 years, I'd been managing my parents' finances, their insurance, their legal documents. I'd been the one organizing their papers, filing their taxes, handling their investments. I'd become intimately familiar with every asset, every account, every piece of property they owned, including the ones Sarah didn't know about. It started when Dad had his first heart attack 8 years ago. Mom was falling apart. Sarah was too busy with her career to help, so I stepped in completely. I took over everything. Their banking, their bills, their business affairs. Dad owned a small commercial property downtown, a strip mall he'd bought in the 80s that nobody talked about because it wasn't glamorous. Just a steady stream of rental income that helped fund their comfortable retirement. The property was still in Dad's name when he died, but here's what Sarah and her expensive lawyer didn't know. 3 years ago, when Dad's dementia was getting worse, he'd signed a quitclaim deed transferring that property to me. Not because he was playing favorites, but because I was the only one managing his affairs. His lawyer had suggested it for tax purposes, and Dad had agreed without really understanding what it meant. I'd never mentioned it to anyone. It was just paperwork to me at the time. Another responsibility in the endless pile of responsibilities I'd inherited. But now it was leverage. The strip mall generated $42,000 a year in rental income. Money that had been quietly flowing into an account I managed for Dad's care expenses. Money that Sarah had no idea existed. Money that was now mine. But the property was just the beginning. See, when you're the daughter who handles everything, you learn things. You overhear phone calls. You see bank statements. You notice patterns. And over the years, I'd noticed that Mom and Dad's finances were more complicated than they let on. There was the life insurance policy worth $300,000 that listed me as the primary beneficiary because I'd been the one filling out the paperwork when Dad's health declined. There was the savings account in both our names that I'd helped them set up for emergency medical expenses. There was the investment portfolio that Dad had transferred to me 2 years ago when he couldn't remember his passwords anymore. All legal, all documented, all mine. Sarah thought she'd won by getting the house, But she'd inherited a beautiful shell with a massive mortgage and property taxes she couldn't afford on her commission-based income. The house that held all our memories, but none of the actual wealth. The funeral reception was a blur of casseroles and condolences. Sarah held court near the dessert table, already talking about renovations and market values with her realtor friends. She was planning to flip our childhood home, to erase every trace of the life I'd protected for so long. That's when our cousin Mike pulled me aside. Mike had always been the family truth teller, the one who said what everyone else was thinking. "Emma, you know this isn't right," he said, his voice low. "Everyone knows what you did for them. Everyone knows Sarah abandoned this family years ago." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "But here's what you don't know," Mike continued, glancing around to make sure we weren't overheard. "Sarah's been calling Mom and Dad for months, working on them. She convinced them you were trying to control their money, that you were keeping them isolated from her. She painted you as some kind of a manipulative caregiver who was taking advantage of them." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "She told them you were the reason she stayed away, that you made her feel unwelcome, that you were possessive and jealous. She convinced them that giving her the house was the only way to repair their relationship with her." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The betrayal was even deeper than I'd realized. Not only had she taken what should have been mine, but she destroyed my reputation to do it. She'd turned my sacrifice into manipulation, my love into greed. But Mike wasn't finished. "There's more, Emma. She's planning to sell the house immediately. She's already got a buyer lined up. She never intended to keep it or honor their memory. She just wanted the money." That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, the place I'd moved to 6 months ago when it became clear that Mom and Dad needed professional care, not just my help. I'd given up the childhood bedroom I'd occupied for over a decade, thinking it was temporary, thinking I'd be welcome back after the funeral. Now I understood. I'd been played. Systematically, carefully, completely played. But as I sat there with my laptop open, looking at bank statements and property records, I realized something that made me smile for the first time in weeks. Sarah had won the battle, but she had no idea there was a war. The next morning, I called my friend Jessica, who happened to be one of the best estate lawyers in the state. We'd gone to college together, and she'd been quietly helping me understand my parents' legal affairs for years. "Jess, I need to understand my options," I said. "Emma, I've been waiting for this call. I've been reviewing everything you sent me over the years. And honey, you're in a much stronger position than you think." The first move was simple. I contacted the property management company that handled my strip mall and instructed them to start depositing the rental income into my personal account instead of the joint account I'd shared with Dad. $42,000 a year wasn't life-changing money, but it was independence. It was proof that I wasn't the helpless victim Sarah thought I was. The second move was more strategic. Jessica helped me file a formal challenge to the will based on undue influence. We had documentation of Sarah's estrangement from the family, records of my caregiving role, and most importantly, evidence that Sarah had systematically undermined my relationship with our parents in the months before Dad's death. But the third move, that was personal. I knew Sarah's real estate business was struggling. I knew because I'd been managing Mom and Dad's finances when they'd lent her $50,000 to keep her agency afloat 2 years ago. A loan that was supposed to be repaid within 12 months. A loan that Sarah had conveniently forgotten about in all the estate planning. The loan was documented, signed, and legally binding. And now that I was the executor of the estate, it was my job to collect on it. I sent Sarah a certified letter demanding immediate repayment of the $50,000, plus interest. Her response came within hours. A furious phone call where she screamed about family loyalty and accused me of being vindictive. "You're destroying this family," she shouted into the phone. "No, Sarah," I said calmly. "I'm just collecting what's owed. Just like you did." The legal challenge to the will moved slowly, but other things moved quickly. Word got around our small town about the family drama, and people started taking sides. The neighbors who'd watched me mow my parents' lawn every week for 15 years. The church members who'd seen me at every service, supporting Mom and Dad. The doctors and nurses who'd worked with me through Dad's final illness. Sarah's narrative about me being controlling and manipulative fell apart under scrutiny. People remembered the truth. They remembered who had actually been there. Meanwhile, Sarah was discovering that inheriting a house isn't the same as inheriting wealth. The property taxes were $8,000 a year. The mortgage still had 12 years left on it. The roof needed replacing, the furnace was failing, and the foundation had settling issues that would cost $30,000 to fix. Her quick sale plan evaporated when the inspection revealed all these problems. The buyer walked away. Sarah was stuck with a money pit she couldn't afford to maintain and couldn't sell for what she'd expected. But the real turning point came 6 months later, when Jessica's investigation uncovered something none of us had expected. Sarah hadn't just been manipulating our parents in their final years. She'd been stealing from them. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there from their checking account when she visited. Then larger amounts when she convinced Dad to write her checks for emergencies that never seemed to get repaid. Over 3 years, she'd taken nearly $20,000 from their accounts. All documented, all traceable, all illegal. Jessica presented the evidence to the probate court, along with our challenge to the will. The judge was not amused. Not only was the will overturned due to undue influence, but Sarah was ordered to make full restitution for the money she'd stolen, plus penalties, plus legal fees. The house came to me, along with everything else my parents had intended me to have. But more than that, the truth came out. Sarah's reputation in our community was destroyed. Her real estate license was suspended pending an ethics investigation. Her marriage, already strained by financial pressure, crumbled under the weight of the scandal. I could have felt sorry for her. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. Instead, I sold the family home to a young couple with small children who promised to love it the way my parents had. I used the money to buy a small house by the lake, an hour away from all the drama and pain. I went back to teaching, taking a position at a school where nobody knew my family history, where I could just be Emma the teacher, not Emma the dutiful daughter. The strip mall continues to provide steady income. I've used some of the money to establish a scholarship fund for students who are caring for aging parents, because I know how hard it is to balance education and family responsibility. The scholarship is in my name, not my parents' names, not the family name. Mean, Sarah tried to reach out once, about a year later. A long email full of apologies and explanations, talking about how stress had made her do things she regretted, how family should forgive family, how we were all each other had left. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Because here's what I learned from all of this. Forgiveness is earned, not demanded. Love is shown through actions, not words. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who will never see your worth. I drive past the old neighborhood sometimes. When I'm visiting friends in town, the young family has painted the house a cheerful yellow and planted flowers in Mom's old garden. There are toys in the yard and laughter coming from the windows. It looks happy again, the way it did when I was small, before duty and sacrifice and disappointment took over. Sarah still lives in town, working at a chain real estate office now, her dreams of running her own agency buried under debt and scandal. We don't speak. We don't acknowledge each other when we pass on the street. She's a stranger to me now, which is what she chose to be long before the will was read. People ask me sometimes if I regret how things turned out, if I wish we could have worked things out as a family, if I miss having a sister. The truth is, I grieved the sister I thought I had years ago. The sister who would have stood beside me during those long nights when Dad couldn't sleep. When Mom was scared about test results. When I was drowning in responsibility and just needed someone to tell me I was doing okay. That sister never existed. The woman who stole from our parents and lied about me to get what she wanted. That's who Sarah always was. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise. My life now is quiet, peaceful, mine. I teach kindergarten, and every day I get to see the world through the eyes of children who believe in fairness, who share their toys, who say sorry when they hurt someone. It's a better world than the one I grew up in. Sometimes former students' parents will ask me about my family, and I tell them the truth. That family is what you make it, not what you're born into. That love is a choice, not an obligation. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. They taught me that blood is thicker than water, but I learned something more important. Dignity is thicker than both. And in the end, when everything else falls away, dignity is what you take with you. It's what lets you sleep at night. It's what makes you able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you did the right thing, even when the right thing was hard. The last thing I heard from Sarah was a voicemail she left 6 months ago, on the anniversary of Dad's death. I saw her name on my phone and felt that familiar tightness in my chest, that old fear and hurt and anger. But then I realized something. I didn't have to listen. I didn't have to let her voice into my peaceful life. I didn't owe her my attention or my forgiveness or my pain. I deleted the voicemail without pressing play, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely free.